We in all the groups. Not math. Not Alex.
Oh, did you post in the bodega?
No, I mean the original's in there.
And we are
live.
Focus on the Families meet CRT when we come back. I give it to you, my gracious host.
What's up, everybody? Y'all know what time it is. It's Friday Night Live, or Freestyle Friday, I should say, where we take videos that Christians have done and critique them off the cuff. Now, this one, I'll give y'all a little bit. We did have to throw a couple slides together for this one, mainly because of part of this video that we're going to be critiquing is dealing with definitions, and we want you all to actually see the definitions, but it's still off the cuff because we knew where to find them definitions. That said, I'm about to throw it around the room, let everybody reintroduce themselves, what their ministries are, if they fundraising, how you can support them, and then we're going to jump into the video today. So first, I'm gonna start with you, Alex. Introduce yourself.
Yes, sir.
Let us know what you're representing and what you're doing.
Yes, sir. Alex with Relentless Pursuit of Purpose is my YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed, I would love it if you did. I'm an apologist and travel around teaching, speaking on evidence for the faith. Also do some nonprofit work here in Chicago, great city, and I'm blessed to be here.
And in my Mia Wallace voice, Mr. Phil Fox.
What up, fam? Coming to you live from the lands of the Anishinaabe and Potawatomi, the ancestral homeland. So shout out to them. Mr. Phil Fox, Drops of Hope Ministry. And yeah, man, just, find me on YouTube, find me on all your socials, Mr. Phil Fox. And yeah, I'm just happy to be here and hang out with my brothers in the faith and to look at some of these things and debunk some of these claims.
All right. And notoriously, my partner in crime, my brother from another mother in the Battle of the Bastards, I shall never stand alone, Mr. Matthew Jackson.
Allow me to reintroduce myself. No, I'm just kidding. I didn't even say that right, but that's what I was hearing in my head.
Right.
Now, this is MJ Jackson with the political think tank, the Urban Christian Institute. No, I'm just kidding. It's not a think tank. No, I'm having a good time. Just ready to get into this. My friend, somebody who I consider a mentor, surprised me this week. He sent me a video on CRT. Y'all know Chris don't have nothing to do with no CRT. Mm-hmm. So I was like, I'm down, brother. I was I'm like, is it a full moon or what?
Oh, no. And y'all know me. I'm the apologist in Detroit. Vocationally, I am a missionary to the city of Detroit. We do it all. We give people jobs. We give people health care. We help churches out. We do evangelism. Matter of fact, last week I was in the streets of Highland Park with a church, and a brother prayed the prayer of salvation. I know a lot of y'all don't like that, but y'all know what it means. It means that a person pledged allegiance to Jesus Christ. And we got, I want y'all. His name is Thomas, first name. So all y'all in the comments, when y'all throwing up for Thomas, next time y'all say y'all prayers, it's a young brother that the Holy Spirit moved on, and I want to see deep roots grow like the tree planted by the rivers of water in him. That's it. And I blog occasionally. It's been a minute, but I blog occasionally. And I like to do videos on social commentary, biblical commentary. And this fit the bill, which is part of the reason why I personally wanted to do a response to this video. And what Matthew was referring to is that, like, I generally don't talk much about CRT because I feel like there's a certain sector of the church that dictates to everyone else what we spend our money on and what we research. And I'm just like, I want nothing to do with that. I don't need the CRT to talk about social issues because the Bible is a book that deals with social issues. So we're going to talk about that a little bit today. That's my reason for wanting to respond to this video. What are some of you guys' reasons for wanting to respond to this video? Let's go in the same order. Alex,
right.
So Matthew. There we go.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of times sometimes these conversations get one-sided, but I don't think it's always the people saying it that realize that. And that's why it's important to have a multiplicity of perspectives. And hopefully that's what we can provide tonight. But it was like the things they said weren't necessarily wrong, at least not all wrong, but there wasn't all the meat there to really bolster the argument or change the argument if you take it to the conclusion.
Right. Yeah. And similar vein, CRT has been boiled down to this, this really basic, fundamental set of, one or, these points or whatever. And to address it in the amount of time that they did in this series really does it an injustice. And part of the some of the reasoning that I wanted to get into it was because there are some massive misrepresentations, and I think this is part of why the society as a whole has a deep distrust within the church, with the church in general, is that some of these misrepresentations are happening, and it's causing people to stumble, and it's causing mass confusion. And we've already had conversations. I've had a few conversations online already about people who are confused about what CRT really is, what it really represents, and what it's really about. So that was my main thing for getting into this conversation.
Yes, I would agree with pretty much everything that's been said, especially what Phil Fox just said. For me, this is a Christian charity issue, right? This is about representing one's neighbor correctly. I'm out here in these Christian apologetic streets, right? I'm reading books by trained philosophers who are meticulous in their representation of atheism, right? They're meticulous in their representation of Jesus mythicism. They take things like that seriously. But when it comes to these justice issues and these things that strike at the heart of our political worldviews, I'm seeing some disregard for the principle of charity. I'm seeing a failure to represent the authors as they're written. I mean, I'm seeing some Christians engage in postmodernism, really. When Rufo said we have decodified the term and recodified it, that's postmodernism, right? That's a form of postmodernism where you just tacking a new meaning onto something that is going to agitate people. So I'm seeing Christians engage in that type of behavior, and it bothers me because it's an issue of killing our witness. That's what it is. It's calling into question our credibility, and I can't do it. So I'm going to do my best to, even if I don't like CRT, look, by common grace, there's some things that it does get right, and there's some things that it does get wrong. But if you're going to be out here in these Christian apologetic streets, and if you're just going to be a witness for Jesus Christ, you should be different. There should be something about you that's different from the world. But if you're starting to sound like the world, that's an issue.
Yeah.
Just one point of clarification of something that Matthew said before I sip my tea, like Kermit. Charity to the Christian is obligatory. It is not optional. Don't have a bad eye. Look it up. That's what Jesus said while I sip my tea. Pull up the slides.
A to the man.
Some of them will get it. If they know Hebrew, they'll get the bad eye reference that Jesus mentioned in Matthew and recognize that charity is obligated. As a matter of fact, if they just read the Old Testament, they would know that charity is obligated.
Right.
Thing called Jubilee, called zero interest loans.
Oh.
Don't get me started.
Careful.
It was charity, y'all. And who paid the bill? For all the people that think that, for a government, the law, Yahweh, the king, to forgive debt, by the wealthy people in the society who had to give a zero interest loan and forgive it. All the people out there that are saying that it's immoral for the government to do away with some of the student loans, then you think about this. Yahweh made that law. Go read Deuteronomy 15, and then think about that as you argue that. And I didn't vote for Biden, and I'm not advocating for the student loan thing. I'm just simply saying the premise that it is immoral or evil for the government to alleviate loans is consistent with the biblical ethic. Therefore, you cannot just inherently say it's evil and say that it's wrong for them to do it. That's the only thing I'm saying. Anyway,
wait,
that, ladies and gentlemen, was free.
Save. Did someone say saved by grace? I better stop.
That's right. That's right. Man, if God knew that grace was free and it's that something that Jesus was paying for it, he would know that was immoral. Anyway, don't start. Don't get me started. All right. Just a disclaimer before I give the disclaimer. My comments, the comments coming from me is not necessarily endorsed or approved by these guys. Although I will also disclaim that they are approved by God. All right, that's it. Copyright disclaimer under the Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purpose such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, education, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright status that might otherwise be infringing. So we're just critiquing. That's the reason of us being here today. We will show their videos, although their videos are free and on YouTube. So we're just showing video that they put on YouTube anyway. That's it. We're going to jump right into it. So let's hit the next slide here. Boop. So this focus on the family. It has 5 episodes. Critical Race Theory, A World Divided. Episode 1, Episode 2, All Are Created Equal. Episode 3, America's Struggle with Race. Episode 4, Standing in the Truth as Salt and Light. Episode 5, Overcoming with Confidence. We're going to throw the actual videos, the link to the videos in the comments for you to go and check them out yourself. We're not likely going to make it through all 5 videos today. We are going to start with this one here. And after I play the video, then we'll begin our critique and continue with the slides. So that's it. Let me do this and everybody mute their microphones.
I'm Dr. Danny Ware, the Vice President of Parenting and Youth at Focus on the Family. I'm excited you can join me in this video series where we'll be talking about critical race theory and how as parents you can talk to your kids about this very important, difficult, and possibly confusing topic for your children. Today you'll hear from 3 knowledgeable guests. Dr. Shelby Steele, an expert on race and a senior fellow at Stanford University's Hoover Institution. John Stonestreet, president of the Colson.
Okay. Looks like we lost Chris there for a second. Yeah. So
Somehow, some way, brother Chris fell out, but he'll be right back with his slides.
Yeah. So what up, BK Apologist? Yeah, good to see you, brother, man. Good to see you in here. Shout out to
I don't know what happened.
Okay, I have no clue what happened. So did you hear the audio on the video?
Yeah, the audio, but you're gonna have to mute your mic because
I know I was going to mute my mic and then it just popped me out for some strange reason. That's just the devil. He don't want to hear this good.
We're gonna get this truth today.
Theology. I know I'm getting everybody in trouble today.
It's okay. Add your slides back in, Chris.
I'm on it right now. Give me a second. All right, back to this. And
so Richard Redeem, good to see you, brother, man.
I'm going
Mr.
to
Green. Well, Chris is getting his stuff together. Yeah. All right. Here we go.
Dr. Danny Ware, the Vice President of Parenting and Youth at Focus on the Family. And I'm excited you can join me in this video series where we'll be talking about critical race theory and how as parents you can talk to your kids about this very important, difficult, and possibly confusing topic for your children. Today, you'll hear from 3 knowledgeable guests, Dr. Shelby Steele, an expert on race and a senior fellow at Stanford University's Hoover Institution, John Stonestreet, president of the Colson Center for Christian Worldview, and Dr. Carol Swain, another expert on race, a public intellectual, and retired university professor. Now, I spoke with these 3 guests along with my colleague, Adam Holtz, and together we want to come alongside you as you engage with your children in conversations about critical race theory. We'll discuss what it is, how it compares to a Christian worldview, and how this all fits within the context of the United States and its founding documents. Now, as with any difficult, controversial topic, it's important to begin with a clear understanding of the major themes of the subject. So let's start off with a few short definitions of CRT, and then Dr. Carol Swain, John Stonestreet, and Dr. Shelby Steele will provide you with a toolbox on this topic as you guide your kids towards a thriving faith. The first one's from dictionary.com, and it says, critical race theory considers the impact of historical laws and social structures on the present day perpetuation of racial inequality. And then from PragerU, it says, critical race theory holds that the most important thing about you is your race, that if you are part of a minoritized racial group, that you are a victim of a system that's rigged against you, a system that does not want you to succeed. If your race is privileged, you're an exploiter. From Wikipedia, critical race theory scholars also view race and white supremacy as an intersectional social construction which serves to uphold the interests of white people against those of marginalized communities at large.
Critical race theory doesn't come at you as parents and children as critical race theory. It's more likely to be disguised as educational equity. And how it impacts our children most directly, I would say, is that it divides the world pretty much into oppressed and oppressors, with white children and their families being included among the oppressors and non-whites as the victims. And so we start off in a situation where one group of children may be made to feel as if they are guilty or their ancestors are guilty of some crimes. And then with children who are minorities, it imbues them with a sense of shame in some cases, but they're seen as victims and as lesser beings, depending on how lesson plans are presented to the children. And so I think it's very confusing, and it's not something that works very well for any of our children.
As we heard from our guest, the primary flaw of critical race theory is that it places what it means to be human only within the context of race. CRT divides people, even small children, into groups of oppressors and the oppressed, based solely on the color of their skin. It teaches that any differences in outcomes come from a system rigged by one side against the other. And this can be confusing and scary to the various personalities in your home. It places humanity in the middle of an unhealthy us versus them scenario. Now, in our next episode, we'll explain why this worldview is not only deeply flawed, but actually damaging and
All right. So they said a mouthful in that short, like 5 minutes, but I'm gonna turn it over to Matthew. I believe it's one of your slides, and you can kind of start the critique. Okay.
All right, it's actually Brother Phil's
Correction,
slide.
Brother Phil slide. All right.
Go ahead, Phil.
If you see a slide, jump in.
All right, yeah, see a slide, jump in. Yeah, so what we got to do is we got to, it's important for us to really look at the because they're making some assumptions, right? They're giving you definitions, they're giving you terms, and I see that Sister Shotty Mills already seen that there might be some very low level scholarship going on here. But this is according to Britannica. But actually, as I was looking at Britannica, I was like, this sounds really familiar. But actually, this definition and the stuff that's coming is actually from CRT scholars' work. And so Britannica actually looked at some of these, and so they say, according to legal scholars, Richard Delgado, one of the founders of CRT, and Gene Stefancic, several general propositions regarding the race and racism that many critical race theorists would accept despite the considerable variation of belief. Right, there's the CRT definitions down there. Brother Chris is showing. Despite the considerable variation of belief among members of the movement, these propositions constitute a set of quote-unquote basic tenets of CRT. So next slide, please. Brother Chris, I think you got the next slide. Here we go. So yeah, so the first feature is something that they call ordinariness. It means that racism is difficult to address or cure because It is not acknowledged. And that is directly from CRT, Critical Race Theory, an introduction. I have a hard copy. Right here. And if anybody is interested, I actually have an extra copy. So hit me up if you guys want a copy of this. But these definitions are directly from this, and these are actual, like, just like it said, Richard Delgado is one of the founders of CRT, and so it's difficult. And brothers, you can jump in on this as well, if you have comments to make on any of these initial core tenets. But what you'll find, and what many of you will see, is that there are some definitions that are being thrown around by CRT, anti-CRTists. And so one of the things that they throw around, especially according, if we can go back real quick, Chris, to the first one, is what you'll see is the tenet of CRT is that they're saying it's ordinary. Nowhere in CRT scholarship does it imply that every single white person is racist. It just says it's ordinary. It doesn't mean that see, again, this is where the misrepresentation and these types of things are starting. It's with something like this, where you read this and it's so what they're really saying is, and so that's a very slippery slope. And that's where Matthew was talking about, this idea of charity and representing each other. So go ahead. Go ahead, MJ.
Let me say something, Phil. Philosophy matters, right? And my biggest gripe is we can do philosophy. We could do pretty good philosophy and apologetics. You got the gurus of epistemology and ethics out there, but somehow they cannot recognize that they also have a theory of race. And so when they read that tenet, and I say tenet, not a presupposition, not an assumption, I'm saying an observable feature of American life. They're not trying to explain what's going on in Russia. So it's not a worldview. They're trying to explain something that's been happening in America. So we get out of here with that worldview talk for a second. But when it says that racism is ordinary,
Matthew, just real quick, you really need to make that point again. I think that you kind of blew past it, and it's so subtle that people will miss it. Say that last thing you said about being a worldview, because that was one of their main points.
When they say that it seeks to explain the world as oppressors and the oppressed, that's just a bald-faced lie. Because it's not. Once again, can you apply critical race theory? Can you apply it in China? No. Can you apply it in Russia? No. Can you apply it in Arabia? No. It's really that simple. So it's not like, come on, Christians. We are commanded to worship the Lord with our mind. So it doesn't matter how many times that people say it. It's not a worldview. Now you're trying to make it a worldview when you bring Marx historical and material dialectic. When you force his historical and material dialectic, he was trying to explain the world in terms of class conflict. Marx was. The critical race theory is not trying to do that. They're really trying to deal with the rollbacks of the civil rights gains, and while these gains are being stalled in the Supreme Court, and the point that I was trying to make is these people and a lot of good Americans look at race through a classical liberal lens. Okay.
Even if they're conservative.
Even if they're conservative. Okay. I'm talking about
liberalism is modern conservatism. For those
classic liberalism is the daddy of modern conservatism. Right?
Hold on, let me say it
Go
real
ahead.
quick. There's a book I'm gonna pull up later, but I've been reading it, and it's on Audible, so I put a clip, but it was talking about the slave masters as promoting a liberal agenda after the Civil War, and I was like, this is the if you don't study the totality of history, you don't even really understand all the terminology that we even talk about today. And before you finish, Matt, I think there's a very low bar that always gets missed, even by me. I was thinking about this today. So critical race theory exists, right? Love it or hate it, whatever people want to say. Even if you hate it, especially if you hate it, ask yourself, why does it even exist in the first place? Because even if it's wrong, it can't be wrong about something that doesn't exist to be wrong about. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, if racism did not exist at all, we wouldn't even be talking about this. They wouldn't have anything to talk about.
Right.
And this has been since the 70s, 60s. It's not new. It's new to some people, but it's not new. And so people were basically like, man, it's like me and Chris are sitting in a room like, man, it seems like all these black people seem to be experiencing the same thing. What you think? Man, maybe we should look into this. And then they looked into it. Like, that's all. Like, that's it. That's basically what
it is. It's really
anyway. I'm sorry, Matt.
Good. Let's keep it moving though, because we got a few slides.
Let me keep it moving by just pointing out that when you start hearing people make CRT to be concerned about hurting folks' feelings, those are dead giveaways that they are forcing a classical liberal view onto a theory that is opposed to that view. By its nature, critical race theory is concerned with structures and not individuals.
Amen. Right. And so here's the second feature as well, just to keep us moving. The second feature is sometimes called interest convergence. So that's just a fancy word meaning material determinism adds further dimension, because racism advances in the interest of both white elites materially and the working class whites physically. Large segments of society have little incentive to eradicate it. So,
okay, real quick, Phil, just for clarification, this is descriptive language.
Right.
It is not attempting to attempting to explain an ontological truth. It's attempting to describe the phenomenon that it's looking at in a way that we can comprehend it and we can engage and critique it. So when it mentions white elites, it's simply being descriptive. Right. It's not saying that there's something inherently wrong with white elites. It's saying, historically speaking, this is who this has benefited, and that's a part of the discussion. That's it. I think that it's so important for us to emphasize points like that, because I think that a lot of people see the language, get triggered, and miss the point.
Yeah, they see the word whites and then automatically, it wants to be racist just for the sake of being racist. No. Yeah, that's a good point. Because and so interest convergence and brothers, correct me if I'm wrong, or if you feel like you have a better definition, but basically there's only movement in society when it has the interest of the elite class and the working class, quote unquote, whites. So if it helps them, that's when there's movement. And so that's a critique of CRT. And again, this isn't just some random abstract thing that they're looking at. You can see it all through American history.
Through world history.
Well,
it's been true.
World history, but more specifically, again, American history, because we're looking at this through the lens of the American history, historical movements. And so we can see interest convergence all through history. The treaty systems with Native Americans, that was classic interest convergence. How they changed and manipulated the treaties and went back on the treaties, that's interest convergence. So all of that is through history, through the historical lens. The third is
before you go to the third, let me just throw this example out there. I'm gonna throw two examples. Number one, what did Constantine do? right. The Christians, that was in his best interest to make Christianity
to merge the East and Western Roman Empire.
Yep.
After war. He had to deal with the conflict that was taking place among the Christians. So the interest convergence was.
I'm just using Christians to illustrate that the dominant caste or the dominant culture can sometimes make changes that benefit the minority in the group when it's in their best interest. Let's also look at the proclamation, the Emancipation Proclamation. Lincoln didn't really care about black people that much.
No,
Man, let's look at the opioid crisis, right? Brown v. Board of Education. I mean, America had Russia pointing the finger at them, saying, "Look how y'all treating those black folks. You can't say nothing about Lenin and Stalin. You don't have. I mean, didn't Hitler study your Jim Crow system?"
Yeah.
Right. So
excellent examples, Matthew. Let's keep it moving now. Let's keep it moving. Go ahead, Phil.
All right. So the third theme of critical race theory is social construction thesis. This holds that race and races are products of social thought and relations, not objective, inherent, or fixed. They correspond to non-biological or genetic reality. Rather, races are categories that socially invents, manipulates, or retires when convenient. So again, this is something this is something Christians would say, right? There should be no argument about this, right? There should be no, because we all know that race is a construct. We are one. There is one race, the human race. We all know this, right? And so, so if you say yes, yeah, absolutely, it's a social construct, then you agree with at least one tenet of critical race theory. So,
and just to be clear, to help those who may not be tracking very well with what's actually going on right here, what we are not doing is preaching the good news of critical race theory. What we're doing is actually defining critical race theory by the scholars who created it, in an effort to expose how the Christians who think and claim that they're critiquing it are really critiquing a straw man.
Yeah.
That they created.
Right.
They gave definitions. Somehow they found definitions from PragerU, which is basically a propaganda outfit. From Wikipedia. Like what university is going to allow you to use Wikipedia as a source? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And from the dictionary.com. And it's like, I get it. They're trying to make videos that help people to understand critical race theory, but dang it, it'd be nice to actually be talking about critical race theory if that's what you're kind of critiquing. So everything that they said in their videos, if you go back and watch it, and then you watch this video, just ask yourself, did they accurately represent, did they steel man, did they accurately represent critical race theory? Because that's what this portion of the critique is about. It's about pointing out that they're not talking about critical race theory, and that's a shame, because Christians, if anybody should properly represent the opposing view or some idea that they're critiquing, it should be Christians. So again, we're not preaching the good news of the gospel. We're simply highlighting what critical race theory is and comparing and contrasting that with what they claimed critical race theory was, because they claim it's such a big problem and it's so anti-Christian, and they didn't even actually use critical race theory. So just to be clear, I want to make sure everybody knows what's going on here.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's a key point, because we're all going to be, of course we're all going to be accused of being CRTists and native crits and all that kind of stuff. So, that's definitely a good point. So another somewhat recent development concerns differential racialization and its consequences. Critical writers in law, as well as in social science, have drawn attention to the ways that dominant society racializes different minority groups in different times in response to the shifting needs, such as, and they're using an example as the labor market. So there's different types of racialization. There's racialization, because I mean, the thing is we hear the argument, of course, of, well, you know, not everyone was always white at one time. There was, you know, the Irish, they were, you know, they were racialized at one time. And then there's racialization of different people groups. Dr. Nathan Cortahena, who's a someone we'll quote from a little bit later, but he was racialized as they have a different racialization, and they would call him in his ethnicity, they would even racialize themselves as white and black. But in the States proper, in the United States proper, he wouldn't. There'd be no way for him to be racialized as white. You know, so those are some other things too. And then and it goes on to say, closely related to differential racialization is the idea that each race has its own origins and ever evolving history is the notion of intersectionality. There's a buzzword. So pay attention to that, because intersectionality has been misrepresented as well. And anti-essentialism. No person has a single or easily stated unitary identity. You know, so that's all it means, is that there's these intersections, right, of these of different, you know, I'm a Native American in my ethnicity, male. My wife is a Native American, female. It's not layers of oppressional classes that we're trying to pancake on top of each other, right? Because that's the common misrepresentation that you'll hear of the anti-CRTers. The final element concerns the notion of unique voice of color, coexisting in somewhat uneasy tension with anti-essentialism, and the voice of color thesis holds that because of their different histories and experiences with oppression, Black, American Indian, Asian, Latino writers and thinkers may be able to communicate to their white counterparts matters that the whites are unlikely to know. Right.
Let me say one thing about that. I know we got to keep moving, and this, once again, philosophy matters. Often this unique voice of color thesis gets conflated with the social construction of knowledge thesis. Those are two different things. One says that knowledge is something that's socially constructed. The other thing says that some people have unique experiences, and that might be able to help you see your blind spots. And I think that is a Christian view. And once again, we shouldn't conflate is it conflating, or is somebody really, you know, mucking up the waters, so to speak?
All right, ready to move on? Okay, so yeah, so the last slide, Dr. Nathan Cortahena is depending on how you look at it, he's a second or third generation CRT scholar. He actually has a direct line from the original the original founders of CRT. He now is, and the reason why I lean on him so much is because Dr. Cortahena is a Bible believing Christian and also a CRT scholar. And so in the world of the radical anti-social justice movements, those are oxymorons in that realm. So that's why I wanted to look at some of his comments and some of the things and how he defines critical race theory. So he says critical race theory is a legal movement because, and this is also another reason, is because a lot of people are looking for simple definitions, right? They're just looking for the magic bullet to put in their holster and then to kill it.
And just a refresher, they called it a worldview. They said CRT is a worldview. That was the premise of their critique of it. So go ahead, finish. Phil.
Yep. Okay, so critical race theory is a legal movement aimed at understanding, resisting, and remediating how U.S. law and legal institutions such as law schools have fostered and perpetuated racism and white supremacy. Before unpacking this definition, I noted, so again, this is from his article at his website. So these are his words. So before unpacking this definition, I note that the following CRT scholars, such as Robert A. Williams of the Lumbee tribe, so this guy is a native crit scholar or CRT scholar, have supported in personal correspondence. Now to unpack. First, CRT in legal studies, its creators are law professors, law students, and practicing lawyers. Okay. Second, CRT proper, that's key, was and is a movement within legal studies, such as it houses multiple and at times competing traditions, which themselves house multiple and at times competing theories. So he wants to give an example. So let me provide a constructive example to illustrate what I mean. Derek Bell, who is considered the leading founder of CRT, operates from within a Black radical tradition, and usually sticks to evaluating racism along the Black-white binary. Bell rarely draws upon critical theorists and the Frankfurt School, and he says he'll say more about that in the conversation. And Robert A. Williams, who we've already established is a native crit scholar, in contrast, operates with the comments of the Red Power movement. So through Williams' respect to the Black radical tradition, it is not primary nor secondary tradition informing his work. Likewise, as a scholar and activist committed to promoting Indigenous rights, Williams does not operate within the Black-white binary. So that's key. Understanding he tends to highlight different ways in which racialized minority communities, Black and non-Black, experience racism and white supremacy. And unlike Bell, Williams draws substantially from critical theorists such as Walter Benjamin. Third, CRT scholars employ a multidisciplinary and dedisciplinary, Cornel West's phrase, source to understand, resist, and remediate how U.S. law and legal institutions such as law schools have nurtured, maintained, and spread racism and white supremacy. Therefore, some CRT texts are principally about understanding these phenomena. That's the key right there. Others principally about how to resist them, and yet others principally about how to remediate them. So,
and another quick point on that last slide when it talks about Black and red, it's red because of Indigenous Native Americans often are referenced as red, and Black because African American. Once again, it is descriptive language and not attempting to explain something from an ontological sense or an essential sense. It's simply describing phenomenon in an effort to critique a problem. So keep that in mind. Don't let you lose your mind over the fact that it said Black and red or it's mentioning color. All right, let's continue. I'll read this one. But what about those who accuse CRT of being so postmodern? Look at what Lindsay writes. Though the materialist pessimism persisted, their approach did not. Materialists dominated the critical race movement from the 1970s to the 1980s, but from the 90s, postmodernists were increasingly in the ascendant. Over time, the postmodernists came to focus on microaggressions, hate speech, safe spaces, cultural appropriation, implicit association tests, media representation, whiteness, and the now familiar trappings of current social discourse 17. This change owes much to the influence of a number of female critical theorists who gained prominence in the late 80s and 90s and promoted radical Black feminist thought, including Bell Hooks, Audre Lorde, and Patricia Hill Collins. These scholars were happy to blur the boundaries of scholarly disciplines while arguing passionately about both patriarchy and white supremacy in ways that mix the legal and sociological, literary, and autobiographical in specifically gendered ways. Pluckrose, Helen, Lindsay, James A. Cynical Theories, page 116 and 17.
Chris, I'm using one of their guys. That's Lindsay, who all these Christians be bringing in to the G3 conferences.
Mm-hmm.
That's James Lindsay. All right. James is in to back up what he just said, he quotes Delgado. And basically all of this is just illustrating that there begin to be a shift from dealing with the subordinated circumstances that Bell and some of the older crits were dealing with into, there was some postmodernism brought in it. And you get all the way till today, you see that the theory has somewhat traveled, and some people have taken on the name CRT, and they're kind of doing their own thing with it.
Mm-hmm.
But the truth of the matter is, if I was to claim to be a Calvinist, right, and I'm claiming the name Calvinist, Reformed Calvinist, whatever, I'm claiming that name, but I'm denying election, I'm denying total depravity, I'm denying these core tenets. Could I rightly be understood to be a Calvinist? No. Like, my question is, why if Christians won't allow that to stand, right? Why, when it comes to politics, do we not apply the same standards and the same scales? Unequal scales is an abomination, according to the Bible.
Right.
I'm done with that slide, by the way.
Okay.
You muted, Chris. All right. So this is some background. I don't know if people still remember the video, but the you can go back and watch, and this applies broadly, and it's just good for everybody to have the understanding, to have these definitions. I feel like every time I'm with MJ or Chris, we always define terms all like the first half of the show.
Got to.
So prejudice, we're going to talk about prejudice, discrimination, and racism. For prejudice is referring to irrational or unjustifiable negative emotions or evaluations toward persons from other social groups, and is primary determinant of discriminatory behavior. A lot of this, you know it when you see it, right? Well, most people know it when they see it. So we can understand prejudice. Let's go to the next one. We got discrimination, which is referring to inappropriate treatment of people because of their actual or perceived group membership, and may include both overt and covert behaviors, including microaggressions or indirect or subtle behaviors that reflect negative attitudes or beliefs about a non-majority group. Now let's go to racism. Okay. Some of it's cut off, but I can see it here. So it's referring to prejudice or discrimination. So now we see this definition of racism encompasses portions of prejudice and discrimination as far as how it's played out or lived out against individuals or groups based on beliefs about one's own racial superiority, or the belief that race reflects inherent differences in attributes and capabilities. So when I say we, those here, that's all I'm speaking for, systemic racism, it's not as much in the way that the media talks about it, because it's a buzzword now and people don't really understand the depth or the foundation or how to ground that terminology, which it can be grounded and is grounded, literally grounded in the Constitution. That's another story. But if we're going back to this, the rest of the definition, it can take many forms, including explicit racial prejudice and discrimination by individuals and institutions. And this is often where people stop. Often, a lot of the people who bang on CRT, and I'm not sticking up for I've said, I don't know how many times I got to say it, I'm not a CRT proponent, but I shouldn't have to say that. But a lot of times people want to whittle racism down to these overt acts that is easily recognizable. And even then there's argument. Well, the police had a reason for doing it or whatever. But they they struggle to see how something was literally codified into law and codified into the Constitution and codified into unwritten laws and codified into society and cultural norms, how you just extract that and think it's all good. And also how it doesn't just take the form of the overt actions of people, because the covert thoughts of people are actually often more dangerous, because thoughts have real world conclusions. Thoughts have real world, when they play out in the real world, it leads to a lot of depravity. So as by individuals or institutions. So I want this to be clear. This is not me saying this. And I was a sociology major. I learned this in college before I ever heard CRT or any of this other stuff people talk about today. This is always what racism meant. It was always any ism is propagated from the dominant group. So sexism from males to female, classism, ageism, like old people, the disparity in age tends to go one way with who's being pushed out. So isms are always propagated or promoted by the group in power because that's the only way it can go. There can be a reaction to that, which we can call reverse racism, but that's a different thing. So as well as structural or environmental racism and policies or practices that foster discrimination and mutually reinforcing social inequalities, racism can also take the form of unconscious beliefs, stereotypes, and attitudes toward racial groups in the form of implicit bias, assuming limited ability when referring to students. But this is the way that this definition was put forth for people to understand. But other forms of racism are modern symbolic racism, in which individuals deny the continued existence of racial inequality while contributing to discrimination and adverse racism through in-group favoritism for the dominant racial group. Now, even if everybody's watching, like, I don't do that, I don't believe that, I'm not guilty of that. This is simply descriptive of a reality, like my brothers were saying earlier. Now, if you, and I'm gonna sound like a CRT person here, if you haven't experienced this, then then you should. But that's actually a really interesting point. And I think we should talk about it more. Maybe y'all will. We always learn like that. Like, why is that ever a controversial issue in any other walk of life where we always say, I learned from their testament, I learned from this person, I learned a new thing here, I learned from this group of people. We always do that. That's how progress is made. That's how knowledge is ascertained. But when it comes to this issue with regards to race, and we're not saying, but CRT people are saying you need to listen to some of these people. And I think sometimes people go too far with that, but we should listen. How can it hurt us to listen?
Right.
It didn't say listen and jump hook, line, and sinker. Listen and use Matt's philosophy and evaluate these things based on the rules of logic. Like, this is how we adjudicate between any position that we're put in front of us. Now, going back to the video, and like I said, if y'all people need to go back and watch it later. There was especially in the first video, I searched the Focus on the Family website, and I might have missed some, but there were no videos that I saw dealing with anything racially or regarding racism prior to 4 years ago. So here's part of the issue for me, and not just for Focus on the Family, but just in general with this types of conversation. Because this part matters. When I don't see anything from an organization founded in 1977, when CRT ironically was coming on the scene, y'all didn't know about it then. It deals that I don't see any videos of dealing with race or racism. In other words, you didn't start addressing race or racial issues until something within the racial conversation came up and presented a potential threat, whether you want to admit it or not, to a current way of life that people enjoy.
Right.
I would say a potential threat and a potential opportunity to raise funds, because I think that is a reality that goes along with organizations like Focus on the Family that suddenly throw their hat into the race, pun intended, of this public conversation and discourse on something that Clearly, they aren't experts, yet
Right.
they're passing themselves off as experts. And then one other point I want to note, adding on to that, is I find it ironic that everybody in this video, other than Stone Street, is a minority. Like, all of a sudden, like, minority voices aren't necessary, yet minority voices are dominating your presentations in an attempt to, I think, make it look good both to your core dominant culture audience as well as to seem more persuasive to the minority audience who you predominantly disagree with and you think get this wrong. So you want them to see people that look like them, and implicit within that is the reality that the social context matters. That it makes a difference in how we apprehend, process, and understand information in discussions like this.
Right. It's like when people say, you know, I ain't racist, I got a black friend.
Right.
But let me continue before I get in trouble. So look, why does this matter in all seriousness? Because this is always the issue, at least in what I see, and it's also why some organizations kind of do these pushbacks on CRT, as Chris was talking about, or things of this nature. And so the reason is racism was never a sin issue or societal issue that you ever cared about. Like, let's just keep it 100. Especially not in the way that you cared about abortion and LGBT issues. Like, keep the same energy. I don't differentiate between which sin issues I call out. Sin is sin. Anybody can get it.
Right.
We call out in-house heretics, black or white pastors. I don't care. I'm about truth. So those of us watching, particularly minorities in minority communities, I feel like I have no choice but to conclude that either, and it's not just focused on the family, it's just these conversations, that either people are completely ignorant of the present day realities of racism and the vestiges of slavery and Jim Crow, or they just simply don't care about racism or the plight of those affected by it. Like, those are the two choices I'm left with. And so if those are not the two choices you want me to be left with, you gotta have a more robust and more full and properly defined and not straw man argument and conversation. Yeah. So the reality is racism was and is an issue, albeit in different ways, but an issue nonetheless. And if Christians, white evangelicals, or anyone abdicates their inclusion on this discussion with a real substantive discussion for true and complete racial reconciliation for almost the entire history of America, this you abdicated this territory, and then CRT comes along and they're addressing it, but they're not doing it the way you want. You can't turn around and be upset about it. Like the SBC took 150 years to issue an apology on slavery, took 1 year to issue a statement on CRT. There's something out of whack with that. Yeah. So that being said, CRT does, as I've said many times, I'm going to say it again, overreach. CRT is also not the gospel, nor does the gospel need CRT to flourish, like Chris said at the opening.
Right.
Here's the problem. The pendulum always overswings when you don't check it, when you're not there to stop it. And the church is supposed to be that body on earth that when something goes too far, we bring it back.
Right.
We are supposed to call out those things in culture and society. But the problem is when you either by choosing or just by lack of concern, get out of this space, you've abdicated that, you've given it over to the enemy. So you can't then reclaim it and also redefine all the terms at the same time. Like that's just not how it goes. And I feel like that it's almost like, man, we just want this thing to go away. Hurry up and make it go away. Can we just get this thing to go away so we can get back to normal? But as I said in 2020, when all the stuff was popping off and it sounded like a war zone out here in Chicago on the streets, I was like, I don't condone the violence and the rioting, but here's the reality that if you don't listen to Black voices, you just won't know this part. And I'm sorry, it sounded like a CRT person. What the thought that I had in my head, maybe y'all had this thought. I was like, but you know what? All the people that putting the signs out, Black Lives Matter, and saying we're with you, and I never had a Black Lives Matter sign out, just in case anybody's wondering. But I appreciate the allies or whatever you want to call them. But this is the other reality that everyone doesn't have to live with. once the fervor of the George Floyd and Breonna and all those things wears off, as it did and it has, I'm still a black man in America. There is no time where I get to turn off. There is no time where it goes, quote unquote, back to normal.
Yeah.
Like, you're fighting for black people. That's good. Y'all kept it up for a year or two, and then you go back to reality for you. And so the fact that that is the option that you get to have is a privilege that some people, minorities, don't get to have. Saying that should not make you have white guilt, saying that should not make me CRT, saying that should not get your panties in a bunch, pardon the terminology. It shouldn't do any of those things. You should be able to say, especially these theologians and apologists, like, just same way that you read critics and you read atheist books and you critique them, and then you go out to lunch with them like y'all are friends. Like, you should be able to keep that same level of humility and fellowship with your brothers and sisters, minorities or otherwise, who are saying things that may not co-sign, or maybe they're new to you, or maybe they're not in the way you want to say. And I'm talking about CRT, I'm talking about us. Nothing we're saying should cause you to look at us as less than a brother. I'll pause there.
Oh, you preached the word right there. That was a word right there. Go ahead, Matthew, jump in.
You you did, and I don't want you to get too radicalized on this channel. You know, we don't want that. But I mean, you pointed out that you didn't observe any type of information on their channel going back to the last 4 years, right?
None, unless I missed one. But if it was, it's only one.
like even all these CRT experts, right? I look at their YouTube channels, and they were a lot of Kimi Katiti, for example. I go back about a year, and she has videos. She's the CRT expert. She got invited to Theology in the Raw. That's my dude. I like him. But she got invited to Theology in the Raw. But you go back before all this Christopher Rufo garbage, and everybody hates CRT, Samuel Say, everybody. She was doing videos about skateboarding and painting, things like that. I wish I could track how many subscribers that she had. But what happened over the last 4, 5, 6 years, right? What happened was this right here. Right. And also the fact that, and I'm a former police officer, so body cameras begin to get in, talks begin to happen maybe right after 2012, after Trayvon Martin was not killed by a cop, but we had a lot of questionable things going on in Fort Worth, where a brother would get killed, and the only person's word that you would have to go on is the police officer. You had to take his word, because the other guy is dead and cannot give his side of the story. My cousin was executed by a police officer. True story, right? And so all of these things are happening, and finally they're getting caught on camera. Civilian cell phones, and folks in the church, especially in some of the multi-ethnic and multicultural churches, are looking at other folks with the side eye like, y'all ain't gonna say nothing. And the truth of the matter is, some folks have the presupposition that police officers can do no wrong, and had they not resisted, they would still be alive. But what happened to "Don't Tread on Me"? Right? What happened to tyranny? Right? What happened to resisting tyranny, a tyrannical government? Right? I know all your language, so I know all the code words. I'm with it. Right? I'm a pro firearms guy too. But I mean, what happened to that for Black people? It has never applied to Black people. The classical liberalism was you can go read the founders of it. Read Locke. Read Kant on his social contract theory. Kant was a racist. This stuff was never built for Black people. and the reaction is maybe they did something wrong. They did something wrong.
So, man, that's a lot there. So everybody go at some point, look up the name Gomez Enes Dezarara. I can never say it. Portuguese man. And if you want to try to trace where racism started, where race started, because race was invented.
Yeah.
I'm not saying he did it by himself, but this is a good place to trace the roots of it. Now, ideas matter, words matter. I don't have it on me, but I used to have copies of old dictionary, and the dictionary changed the definition for the word black in the 15th century. What happened a few decades later? In order to enslave people, in order to dehumanize people, you have to feel warranted for dehumanizing them. Has one way you do that, because they were already Europeans were already going like places where darker people were, like India and other places, but they never considered them as they considered those from the African continent, even though the same hue. So once the terminology changed, it gave license to the practice. So I don't have time to go through his whole history, but he was asked to write the Chronicles of Discovery and the Conquest of Guinea, 1453, which he retold the Portuguese conquest of Guinea and the start of the Atlantic slave trade. So once that slippery slope started, we know how it ends. I want to go. Oh wait, yeah. Let me go to these two quotes real quick, and then I'll turn it over, because the guy we haven't. I guess that's in video too, but I'm gonna throw it in here now because it'll apply everywhere. Because at one point he says, "What's the gentleman's name? The African American gentleman? I forgot his name, but he says something about moral progress in America and how America's made so much moral progress." Number one, no human being can make that statement. Not because it's not true, but because you'd have to have omniscience to know that. You have to know the history of every country and the totality of the nuances of that history to know how much moral progress they have or haven't made. Now, has America made progress? Yes, but this is I don't know why people think this is a cogent argument in favor of anything. The fact that I'm better than I was yesterday does not mean I don't have room to improve. I don't even know how that follows. So the fact that there's not currently slavery or not currently Jim Crow does not mean that racism is gone. It does not mean that we don't have more room for progress. So until things are perfect or close to perfection, why am I wrong for trying to get it to look as much like the kingdom of God on earth as I can? Like why would any kind of thing that we do or anyone does that, in Chris's words, is aiding human flourishing, why would that ever be a bad thing?
I want to attempt, because like this is my shirt I wore today. Almost everything I say is intentional. It says Plato's Cave, Search and Rescue. And I think it's because Christianity has effectively been reduced to a Platonic paradigm where the goal of Christianity is to escape this earth and go to live with God, go to live in heaven, with God. And you accomplish that by A, getting saved, and B, keeping yourself from getting dirty till the day that you die, or to when the Lord returns, which usually the day that you die up until this point comes before when the Lord returns. And by thinking and practicing Christianity that way, Christianity loses its historically, biblically grounded social paradigm. Because if you actually pay attention, which is part of what I'm going to highlight when I get to my verses, I did switch the slides. So Matthew, when you pull the slides back up, it'll be on the slide for Alex. Alex, you jump back in, take on those two slides, and then I'm going to jump into some of the theology of this, critiquing their arguments with theology actually from the Bible. And then we'll look at that second video for those of you, because Alex may not have to get out of here. He may not be able to stay all the way to the end. The rest of us, we might get through this second video also before we get out of here tonight. So go ahead, Matt. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, so I wanted to highlight. So I'm reading this book right now, and it just happened. I had just happened to be reading it when you guys asked me to come on here. And actually, an older white man, my wife's grandpa, bought this for me, but not because I asked him, just because he wanted to get me the book. Anyway, he was a history teacher for all of his career in university. So let me see if I can real quick unpack the myth. So what is the myth? And this is a part of history nobody taught me in school. I don't know if y'all ever learned any of this in school. I'm certain most people don't know this, but the myth of the lost cause was something that was intentionally promoted after the Civil War to say that slavery was already on the decline. And so there was no need to fight a war. Like the North was just over aggressive and they were pushing us around. But at the same time as they're saying this, I'm talking about Jefferson Davis and the leaders of this, they're also saying they're trying to paint the narrative that slavery was mutually beneficial and everybody was lovey-dovey. So wait, why was it on its decline when it's the most profitable cotton was the most profitable export over every other export combined? So if the slaves like it, the masters like it, it's profitable, why would it be on the decline? You see what I'm saying? You can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't have it both ways. So Confederate Major General Patrick Claiborne says, surrender means that the history of this heroic struggle will be written by the enemy, that our youth will be trained by the Northern school teachers, will learn from Northern school books, their version of the war, will be impressed by all the influences of history and education to regard our gallant dead as traitors and the veterans that remain as fit subjects for derision. The fear was that all of their people that they knew and loved in the South would be looked at, as many of us look at them now, as the people on the wrong side of history. And to prevent that, they tried to rewrite the narrative, but it's hard to rewrite 300 years of oppression and brutal murder and rape and all the other stuff that happened and make it look sugary sweet. So let me go to the next one. And this is actually by Jefferson Davis himself, leader of Confederate. And he says, so this is a quote. He tried to paint slavery this way, wrote it. It was peaceful and contented laborers. Slavery involved close relationships between masters and slaves. Slaves were trained in the gentle arts of peace and order and civilization. They increased from a few unprofitable savages to millions of efficient Christian laborers. Their servile instincts rendered them contented with their lot. Their strong local and personal attachments secured faithful service to those to whom their service of labor was due. A strong mutual affection was the natural result of this lifelong relation. Never was there a happier dependence of labor and capital on each other. I mean, you want to talk about cognitive dissonance. Like to even be able to pen those words is either just complete bold-faced lie or just complete disconnect from reality.
Wow.
But this was on such a scale as to literally almost immediately rewrite the history of the country. Yes, sir. And not lose twice, basically. We're losing the war. We're going to lose three times. We're losing slavery. We're going to lose the war. We don't want to lose in the history books too. And so why am I saying this? Because I know everybody's on here, or even people who watch this and say, well, the people who are against CRT, they would agree with this too. I'm sure they would now. Here's a huge issue that has to be dealt with. When they said that, I don't know if it was video 2 or 3 or which video. Y'all remember that they were saying, I know we had slavery and we did some bad things.
It was 2 and 3. Both of them.
Man,
I think the beginning of 3, he said that, but I think he said something similar to 2 also.
Never ever let somebody minimize slavery or any of the effects or anything that even came after it as bad things. When we're talking about one of the grossest, most horrific human violations in the history of the world. And I mean it just that strongly.
Yeah. And there just for the record, there were an estimated over 250 slave revolts in antebellum South.
Right.
But
they were happy and contented. What are you talking about?
Estimated over 250 revolts. Like how many states was down there?
According to that.
Right.
That's what that
Mr.
Second
Phil.
Amendment is for.
Mr. Phil, were the Native Americans happy and contented all the time?
All the time. We were in canoes, and we were braiding each other's hair. And
okay, cool.
Yeah,
Maybe
all
I
the
got it
time.
wrong then.
Yeah.
So here's the reality. I mean, we can talk about the practice of breaking the buck, breaking the bull, whatever you want to call it. And I don't know if I can even describe what that is on this channel. The abuse, I can. Okay.
You can describe it, brother.
I don't know if I. So
rated R for everyone in your kids.
The biggest black male slave in the group, when they get the new lot, it's kind of like a prison thing, like for the master to assert the dominance, you pick out the biggest one. Depending on the master, they would rape them in front of their family,
sodomize
them, and often cut off the
genitalia.
Yes, in front of the family, in front of the kids. Who learned that in school? So I'm not saying this should promote white guilt. I'm saying until you know the totality of the history, you can't understand the effects that are still lingering. Because the other thing we got to remember is Jim Crow was like 40 years ago. It's not like people want to act like this was so long ago that we've come we've come a long way.
Yes,
but stuff doesn't disappear like that. That's so entrenched. It doesn't disappear in one generation or even two. So
and just to add, like black and white, again, I just got to reiterate this point. Black and white are descriptive. What Alex was just talking about, this isn't a black and white issue. This is a justice and righteousness issue. This is a on the side of God issue or on the side of sinful man issue.
Yeah.
Black and white is simply descriptive language so that we understand what we're talking about. And I'm gonna use that to parlay into my slides, because one of the things that they were constantly arguing was that how reprehensible it is, how evil it is, how anti-biblical it is to label people oppressors and label people like victims or some sort of a victim of oppressor. So I thought it would be interesting to help people to actually read their Bible and recognize that, well, actually Yahweh did this. So if you think that it's wrong to label people oppressors and such, you disagree with God, because over 125 times the word oppress is used in its various adjectival forms: oppression, oppressing, oppressor, oppressed in the Old Testament. I'm giving you two samples just so that you can understand the gravity, or you can understand the way that both Yahweh as well as the Jews themselves as representatives of Yahweh viewed this concept of oppression. And this is one. Psalms 10, 17, and 18. You, Yahweh, hear the desire of the afflicted. You encourage them and you listen to their cry, defending the fatherless and the oppressed, so that mere earthly mortals will never again strike terror. So one of the things that the Jews identified God as the liberator, as the defender of the oppressed. That's how the Jews saw this. And this is just one verse. You do a word search and you see how prevalent it is yourself. I'm simply giving you a taste, a sample. This is Psalm 72. This verse is the writer of the psalm beckoning God to endow the king of Israel with the quality that we just previously mentioned that they saw God as, to endow the king with the same quality as a defender of the oppressor. Let's read here. Endow the king with your justice, O God, the royal son with your righteousness. May he judge your people in righteousness, your afflicted ones with justice. May the mountains bring prosperity to the people, the hills, the fruit of the righteousness. May he, the king, defend the afflicted among the people and save the children of the needy. Well, what about the children of the people, of the rich? Why don't he save the children of all the people? Why does he only talk about saving the children of the needy? It's because certain people were marginalized and oppressed, and God understood that the people who weren't oppressed didn't need this defense, didn't need this protection. So the people, the Jews are beckoning Yahweh to endow the king to behave like Yahweh behaves. May he crush the oppressor. Jump down to verse 11 of the same chapter. May all kings, in other words, all kings of the earth, all the nations, all kings bow down to him, and all nations serve him. For he will deliver the needy who cry out, the afflicted who have no one to help. He will take pity on the weak and the needy and save the needy from death. He will rescue from the oppression and violence, for precious is the blood, is their blood in his sight. So a lot of Christians today balk at the notion of labeling Christians or categorizing Christians in a way that they think makes them victims. Oh, that's how they were talking in the video. They were like, Swain, she's like, oh, you're making these people feel like they're victims. It's like, duh, people are victims. Again, I'm not saying everybody that claims to be a victim or everybody that claims to be oppressed is oppressed. What I'm saying is there are actual people who are, and what I constantly see with people, Christians here in America today, they do the same thing that Focus on the Family just did. They're all against the labels, but I don't see you actually crying out to God for a king that brings justice. Oh, wait a minute. We have one. His name is Jesus. Let's go on to our next slide. Because this is not only a theme of the Old Testament. This is exactly how Jesus announced his ministry in Luke chapter 4. And not only did he announces his ministry, what he came to earth to do. This is him announcing, this is what I came to earth to do, to liberate oppressed people. He tells you who the oppressed people are. Let's see what he says. The Spirit of the Lord is on me because he has anointed me to proclaim good news. That's gospel, euangelio, to those that don't know. To the poor. He sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed, poor, prisoners, blind. These are all categorically people who were, generally speaking, oppressed. He came to set the oppressed free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. Now, remember at the beginning of this show, I was talking about the year of Jubilee and debt-free and all that forgiveness of student loan debt. Again, I'm not a Biden fan. Didn't vote for him. I'm simply speaking to the principle. Principally speaking, if you go back and read Deuteronomy chapter 15, Yahweh tells the Israelites, in their case, there need be no poor people among you. He also tells them that the reason that there need be no poor people among you is because he legislated, he prescribed laws. Any poor people among you, you are to loan money at zero interest. And then after 6 years, if they haven't paid the loan back, you forgive the debt. It's free. Now it's gone, poof, going away. That's justice. That's righteousness. And Yahweh coming from God himself. Some people in America call that oppression. Some people in America call that evil and sin. Oh, it's sin to make somebody else pay the debt for somebody else. Not well. You should think about that. When you should think about who you're calling a sinner. You're calling Yahweh a sinner when you say that sin, because those are his prescriptions for his people. So this to me is one of the biggest challenges when it comes to having these conversations about CRT. Again, I've never read a book on CRT. The closest was Vodi Bachman book, and apparently he maybe plagiarized some stuff. Possibly one, and two, he clearly didn't accurately represent the data that he was attempting to represent, because he was hodgepodge smashing stuff together to make things into his own set of ideas to represent his own ideas. You can go back and look at our. We did a video on that. You can go back and look at the video on that. But the point is this. The point is this. It is biblical, both Yahweh, Jesus. It is biblical to actually recognize, rightly identify what you are seeing. This, when I'm talking about this descriptive language, rightly identify if a person is an oppressed person. If we got a broken criminal justice system here in America, and Jesus came to set prisoners free, right? Like that's not platonic. He was literally coming to set people free. You know, it's not platonic. Then we Christians should care about injustice. We should care about the imbalanced scales in all the ways that it impacts the people of our society, because that's how we rightly represent the king. Endow your king with justice, oh God. Psalm 72. We're God's people. We're the royal priesthood. We're the people that Jesus left here on earth to represent him. And either you see that Christianity is a platonic religion and none of this stuff down here on earth matters. You just need to keep yourself from getting dirty until Jesus come back, until you die, and you get to go live in the heavenly kingdom of God. Or we are supposed to be down here on earth living as communities of people, living out the values and principles that God has prescribed in his word as a reflection, as like a light, kind of like a light to the nations in the Old Testament. You know, that's kind of what they were doing. They were living as a light. And that's the same thing we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be the righteousness of God. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, right? You know, we're supposed to be the righteousness of God so that God can reconcile the world to himself through us, right? So I think that part of the problem of this discussion is Christians actually reading their Bibles. Because not only do they not read CRT authors, I don't think they read their Bible. Because I just read scripture to you. And if you aren't familiar with that, you have no business having conversations on this. You have no business being a teacher of somebody on this particular subject. You need to go back and learn what the Bible actually teaches, and then understand what the Bible teaches, then understand what CRT teaches, figure out how you're going to talk about those two, properly reflect them, and then go forth and do justice and righteousness as God has prescribed us to do. Let's go. I think this sends us into the second video here. This video is 7 minutes long, and we're probably not going to get through critiquing the whole thing, but they do say quite a few things in this video. I think what I'm going to do with this one is let the person talk, stop. We can share our comments and then do that until we get through the video. And this will probably be the last video that we critique if we make it through it. We'll probably stop right at 2 hours and give our final thoughts. Okay. All right. So that's what you guys can expect. Let me go over and hit play. Yeah, let me hit mute on my microphone first so that we don't get that feedback like earlier.
In our first episode, we explored critical race theory at face value. And by its own definition, CRT gives ultimate value to people based on their race. Now, we need to teach our kids that we are all God's masterpieces, created on purpose and with purpose to fulfill God's invitation for each of us in this world, and that we need to cheer each other on. Now, in this episode, you'll hear about practical ways for you as parents to communicate with your children about CRT, exposing the flaws of this worldview. Now, here's more from our guests, Dr. Shelby Steele, John Stonestreet, and Dr. Carol Swain.
The problem with CRT is not the R. It's not the fact that we're talking about race. To not talk about race, racial division is to ignore not only a significant part of America's history, but also to ignore the way many people experience life in America. And we need to listen and take that seriously.
So racism is still a serious issue that we need to grapple with.
Well, I mean, I think what we know to be true about the human person, biblically speaking, is that we're made in the image of God, but we're fallen, we're sinners. Right. And one of the ways that we sin against God and against others historically over and over and over is some form of ethnic discrimination. Where CRT makes the mistake is locating this particularly in one group of people, and that's it, as opposed to seeing it as rooted more deeply into what it means to be human.
Most Christians, or all of
He did it again.
Well, I'll just say something real quick, because well, this is not the same type of talk when it's a specific issue, for example, abortion, where it's not just, oh, well, you know, we're all falling, it's an issue. No, it's like this particular thing is sin and we need to get rid of this particular thing. And it's very, you know, there's no bones pulled. We know exactly what the attack is against. But then when he brought up racism, he's like, well, you know, and he asked him a very direct question to which the answer is just yes. You could just said yes. He's like, so racism still a big issue? Yes. Well, you know, it's just we're fallen people.
I thought it was me on that one.
Oh, no, it's not you. It's not you. But I mean, I appreciate his comments, but just go there like you go there with everything else.
Right.
You got, I don't know if you got the video back.
Yeah, he was soft toeing around around racism, man. He was really trying not to hurt anybody's feelings. The issue with racism, right? Racism is being reduced down really to issues of interpersonal interactions, right? That's what it's being reduced down to. Now, somewhere after all of the civil rights gains that were passed, racism began to be put out there as an issue of personal prejudice between individuals. Historically, race prejudice, which was the words that people like W.E.B. Du Bois used and other folks, was a byproduct of the systems that were in place. It was the fruit of the systems that were in place. So the issue was always systemic. I mean, we can go through. It would take us all night to go through the historical evidence of how racism was defined and classified by people in the abolitionist tradition, by people in the radical tradition, by folks in the civil rights tradition. It wasn't until after the civil rights tradition, it wasn't until after the civil rights movement that people began to start reducing racism down to issues
Individualism.
to psychological issues between individuals, to psychological sins. The biblical issue here with racism is not only do you hate your brother, that can happen, right? Jesus said to be careful if you call somebody stupid or you fool. Raka is the better word. You said be careful. But the issue is the unequal scales, right? We can apply the unequal scales to desperate treatment, right? In the medical field, right? In the civil rights movement never touched the criminal justice system. Didn't touch it at all. That was the one place that the civil rights movement never touched. And we have plenty of evidence
because they were under its boot the whole time.
Yeah, they were under its boot
Fire
the whole time.
hoses, dogs.
I got a question. And I mean, it's really for them, but I want to see what y'all think about this. Sorry to cut you off, Matt. So we're not going to get to, I don't know if it was episode 3 or 4, whatever. The gentleman Steele, was his name? Dr. Steele?
Shelby Steele, Dr. Steele.
Okay. So I think at one point he said, he was going on about how when he was growing up and he's like how monumental the act in 1964 was, which it was. I mean, the Civil Rights Act and law and everything, like that was significant. We wouldn't even be here doing this probably, at least without being watched. But it's interesting to your point, Matt. Why did the government system have to enact that policy to eradicate something that's not systemic? If it's only on the individual basis, why did a governmental system, have to be the force to enact that progress? Why did the judicial system, when the times they did get it right with Brown versus Board or any other trials, why did those things have to be codified into law to make change? Like the revisionist history is shocking by some, especially by African American, PhD individuals, that I don't know. I feel like it should be a little more scrupulous in the details. But the reality that when things were codified into law, literally in the 5th paragraph of the Constitution, it calls us 3/5 of a person. That's the founding document, right? There it is. And so how do you have a country founded with that and then not automatically know? Like, this shouldn't even be an argument. Like you said earlier, this shouldn't even be it was systematized. Therefore, it's systemic. That's just definitions. That's not me saying something extra. That's just what the word means, right? But when it comes to abortion, we had to systematically debunk that one. The system must come against that sin, because that's the big one. And so the kind of the double talk, the kind of not keeping that same energy, or however you want to say it, that is tending to happen. And then on top of it, I think like episode 3, they open with the MLK quote, and I'm like, I'm like,
just stop, just stop. I mean, it's
like,
low hanging fruit, man. Like, y'all, you want to impress me? Like, pull a quote from a Nat Turner. Pull a quote from somebody that nobody expect you to pull a quote from. Quoting Martin Luther King is
Stokely Carmichael, somebody, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's virtually insulting at this point.
Yeah, give me some Oliver Cromwell Cox or some Franz Fanon.
You know,
give me something.
Just give me some Du Bois, something.
Give me some Du Bois.
I'm good. But anyway,
there you go. the father of sociology, right?
Exactly. And so, like you said, this is such a long conversation. I'm not going to try to unpack everything here, but I just thought some people have this tendency to minimize certain sins, not even necessarily for political reasons, but just because if I magnify it to the extent that it should be, I might throw myself under the bus.
Right.
I actually don't think that you are throwing yourself under the bus, Mr. White person or white woman, if you do that. I just think you're being honest. I understand to an extent why you might feel that way, but I also don't. Because at a certain point, when I'm watching what happened to Native Americans, and the movies are very vivid nowadays. When you see it, I don't want to just tug on your heartstrings. I wanted to tug on your logical strings and say, man, my country did this.
Right.
Maybe my country's not as perfect as I thought. That's okay. You don't have to.
Yeah.
I mean, if I was born in France, I'd love France. If I was born in England, I'd love England. I was born here, so I like it. Like that's really what it comes down to. And so to make this kind of nationalistic pride the center focus, it's just doesn't really make sense in the long run. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I mean that's an excellent point. You know, I mean it's funny, the stuff that we've never been taught in school. You know, and I've heard the argument too. Well, it's impossible to teach the whole history, but it's always been, you know, whitewashed in a way that helps America to shine. And one thought I've always had, especially with this conversation about race, is let's say there was never a rebellion. Let's say there was never any pushback by natives. And they just allowed for the what would have happened,
man.
There's documented and you know, there's some things that I had that you know, and sorry to self promote, MJ, but on my channel we're going to be looking at the doctrine of discovery, and we've already done one lesson on manifest destiny, but there is documented in open court and in written history that the thing is that they were looking to eradicate the native indigenous race. So there's intent and there's purpose there. And again, that goes back to your point, Alex, is that you know, looking at the whole lens and looking at the whole landscape of American history, and seeing that look, the bedrock foundation is racism, and there are signs out there, but again, like these things are the fact that some of these things are embedded, so deeply embedded, that every political person in their bone is American exceptional. And so what they want to do is they want to preserve, because politically, how you're not going to win a presidential race by bashing America. That's not going to happen.
Right.
And so you have to preserve the status quo. And so that's why there's this constant tippy toe around, you know, just like you said, it's always, this is a sin, abortion's bad, you know, LGBTQ, you know, those got to get rid of them. Race. Oh yeah. You know, that's why
Ain't no
you
racism no more.
right, and that's why you get Phil Johnson talking
Just
about
a few dum-dums here and there.
right, and that's why that's why you get folks like Phil Johnson who are, you know, trying to tiptoe their way around you know, racist theologies and all these things. Let's bring it back to the church. I mean, let's be intellectually honest about these things. Would things be the same if there was no pushback? You tell me that, and then tell me that there's no issues.
Man, Phil, you made me think. I forgot this earlier because I think Dr. Steele also said something to the effect of, well, he was talking about the whole moral progress of the country. It was in that segment.
Yeah.
Okay, here's the reality to drive the point home that Pastor Phil made. I just called him Pastor Phil. That Phil made. Okay, every progress that has been made, Jim Crow, the Civil War, nothing was given. Like I don't. People are like, "Oh, we're good now. We can stop fighting." No. Everything that was gained was fought for. King was assassinated, right?
Yep.
All of them were assassinated. So, like, there was 200. We say 250 revolts. Chris, 250 revolts. Most people only know Nat Turner.
Right.
We got Harriet. I mean, like, nothing was given. So it's easy to say now, oh, slavery's done, and like it just happened. Like America just woke up and was like, oh, we were wrong. Sorry about that, guys. Here you go. Take your 40 acres and a mule, which we still haven't gotten. Anyway, but the reality is nothing was. So you can disagree with the current fight that CRT is, some say, waging. I don't really say that they are, and I'm not fighting it with them anyway. And you can disagree with that and say that it's an unnecessary fight, but every bit of progress has been fought for. Every bit of progress that has ever been achieved by any group in this country, non-majority, was fought for.
The belt.
People died. People were lost things. People were mistreated, abused in every situation. All of them. So the idea, and I'm not saying this is a point to stick up for CRT. I'm simply saying this as a point of history.
Right.
Historically, the facts of the matter, if we still care about reality, are every benefit that was gained, including the 1964 act that the man was talking about, people died to get to that point, to even get the president to sit at the table. So let's not act like, oh, America woke up and just decided to be good now.
Right.
That's not how the story goes.
Mm-hmm.
People died, and then the president died.
Oh no, y'all want to see some interest convergence real quick? What did Lyndon B. Johnson say was his motive for the Civil Rights Act, for the Great Society, all that? He said, "I can get the black vote for the Democratic Party
for 100 years."
For 100 years.
For 100 years. That's what he said. Go look it up.
Now, even my white conservative friends who sit there and complain about the black church being in the pocket of the Democrats would have to concede that fact. Now, if you want to call it convergence theory, interest convergence, fine. But he said what he said. And it demonstrates that he wasn't some nice person that out the kindness of his heart. You know, I understand that Lyndon B. Johnson could drop that N-bomb with the best of them.
He's on tape.
You know, I mean, Reagan was dropping some words too. We know how Nixon felt, right? Reagan was allowing the CIA basically to import cocaine into our communities, and Nixon, you know, his advisors told you what he was doing to the hippies and to the blacks. So let's not pretend.
I have to report a verbal error. I said 100 years. He said 200 years. My bad.
My bad.
Wow.
But once again, to my brother's point, kicking and screaming every step of the way. That same Civil Rights and Voting Rights Act that Shelby Steele praised. Just in 2013, Supreme Court Justice John Roberts gutted it, right? And the reason why he gutted it was because, look, we have a black president now. America is no longer racist, right? We were able to, people were able to vote because of that Civil Rights Voting Rights Act.
Right.
And your reason for gutting it is because it worked. What type of sense does that make? I'm gonna gut it because it's working.
That's convergence interest. Hey, throw the slides back up real quick because we're about to close out. We got one question. If anybody else have any questions, you can throw a question in. It's a possibility that we'll do a part 2 of this and get into a little bit of the rest of the videos. Again, like sadly, and as when I say sadly, I mean this is one of the indictments against it. I think the entire series on CRT is like 30 minutes long. It's like 5 minutes, 7 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, and 4 minutes. So it's like it's incredibly short. It's historically inaccurate. It is negligent in the way that it seeks to define these things in the very first video. There's so many problems with it. So we may end up doing a follow-up video of this. But this is another. I always want us as Christians to think about these things from a biblical standpoint. I think often that's what they think they're doing. Unfortunately, I'm convinced they don't read the Bible, or if they do read the Bible, they certainly don't read it. They certainly don't have a very firm understanding of it. Is it biblical to make class distinctions for critique? That's a question. I intentionally picked the New Testament. First of all, I'll say the Old Testament, like literally everybody in the Old Testament, it's very few individuals getting judged. It's usually entire kingdoms getting judged. It's like, hey, the sins of the Amorites and the Canaanites have not yet reached its fullest. I'm gonna wait 400 years. And think about that. Nobody's living 400 years, right? At this point, no one's living 400 years. So that means multiple generations, theoretically, a generation is about 40 years, right? 25, 40 years. So multiple generations. Let's just call it 10 generations since it's 400 years. So the accumulation of 10 generations of people is what it took for God to judge the Canaanites and the Amorites and to excommunicate them, to put them out of the land that he's putting the descendants of Abraham into. So when we think about sin, we think, oh, the people of today have no correlation to the people of yesterday with slavery. First of all, the problem is not simply slavery. The problem is racism. And slavery was just one aspect of racism. And there were another 200 years. There was 86 years of slavery from the Revolutionary War to emancipation. And there's 102 years from emancipation to the Civil Rights Act in the 60s. And then there's roughly been 55 years since civil rights till we get to today. And while progress was made at each stage along the way, it was never eradicated. And when I say eradicated, I don't mean completely. I mean in a sense that it's not a widespread problem impacting a large number of people, kind of like the Canaanites and the Amorites, right? Whole community of people being judged. So here's the book of James, New Testament. So just so we can't say, oh, that's Old Testament, that's New Testament. James chapter 1, verse 26 and 27. Those who consider themselves religious and yet do not keep a tight rein on their tongue deceive themselves, and their religion is worthless. That particular verse there, 26, is how I feel about this video from Focus on the Family. It's a bunch of people bumping their gums about stuff that we just simply is proved is inaccurate. Like it's CRT is not what they think it is. It's not a worldview. It's legal studies. It's not about classifying people with labels and everything about those labels being absolutely true for every single person that falls into those buckets. It's not. It's about understanding how large groups of people have been impacted by racism systemically, historically speaking, here on American soil, and how you can promote justice and fix that. It's trying to identify the problem so they can turn around and fix the problem. Second half of this verse. Religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this: to look after orphans and widows and the distressed, and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. And just in case it's not clear, keeping oneself from being polluted by the world is in part looking after the widows, the orphans, and those who are in distress. Don't be like those sinners who turn their back on marginalized people, or worse, oppress and exploit them for their financial benefit. And how do we know that some of them exploit and oppress them? You ask? Let's look at James chapter 5. Same book, right? James chapter 5, verses 1 through 6. Now listen, you rich people. James must be one of them intersectionality CRTist people, because he classifying the rich people. Something wrong with him. Hey, you rich people, weep and wail because of the misery that is coming on you. Your wealth has rotted, and the moths have eaten your clothes. Your gold and silver are corroded. Their corrosion will testify against you and eat your flesh like fire. You have hoarded wealth in the last days. You have hoarded wealth in the last days. That's scripture. That's New Testament. It is evil and sinful to hoard wealth. You've hoarded wealth in the last days. Look, the wages you failed to pay, the workers who mowed your fields are crying out against you. You taking advantage of poor people and not paying them fairly. God hears the cry of that injustice. The cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord Almighty. You have lived on earth in luxury and self-indulgence. You have fattened yourselves in the day of slaughter. You have condemned and murdered the innocent one who was not opposing you. James is not saying that all rich people are oppressors. James is saying that rich people who behave this way, who hoard up wealth and choose to live a life of luxury rather than to being gracious to their employees, those are the people that the Lord Almighty is hearing the cries about. Not simply everybody because they're rich. It's sad that I even have to say that, because to me it's kind of common sense. It's common sense that this is specifically talking about people who behave in a particular way. But the point of the 2 points is this. One is just talking don't mean nothing. Taming that tongue, making sure that you ain't misrepresenting God. God cares about marginalized people. We saw that in the Psalms 10 and Psalm 72. We still see that here in the New Testament in James. What God cares about, true religion, that God the Father accepts, is taking care of marginalized, looking out for marginalized people, oppressed people. And then lastly, you can label, sometimes people get into communities and behave similarly within those communities. Often the Bible, both Old Testament and New Testament, talks about rich people like that. Yes, poor people do it too, just for the record, just so people don't get it twisted. Poor people do it too. I grew up and I saw poor people cheating the system on welfare. I saw that. I did. That's true. Unfortunately, they shouldn't be the stereotype of it, because if you just look at the statistics, African Americans have always been a very sliver minority in this country. So why are Black people the poster child for things like welfare exploitation, when in reality, welfare exploitation is more prominent among people of the majority culture by virtue of the fact that they're a majority. They're the larger percentage. But somehow,
statistically, it's white women.
Right, but exactly. Statistically speaking, that's a fact. That's not that there is not a suspicion. They did a study. This is what they found. It's a fact, right? But what we see, because of Reagan back in the 80s with the welfare queen, what we see is the stereotype, the composite image that people think of when they think of welfare exploitation is African American women. So yeah, this is the point. The point is we Christians can't fall into the trap of being blinded by our societies. We have to lose, and this is a whole nother thing that we'll address if we do this follow-up video. For some reason, they seem to have this leaning of preserving the integrity of America. What integrity? I don't know, because from its origin, it's like it's genocide of the Native Americans, and it's slavery, right? In what way is America great? In what way is America this virtuous nation in comparison to all the other nations of the earth? I don't know, but for some reason, Christians, this type of Christians, these focus on the family type, and so many other Christian apologists and a whole bunch of other John MacArthur types, for some strange reason, they want to preserve the virtue of America. And not only do you have to be an apologist for Jesus, apologist for Yahweh, you got to be an apologist for America. That don't make no sense to me. I don't know. We'll talk about that later. Do we have any questions? I know I ran it there for a second there. I've been holding that in. It really frustrates me that so many Christians I'm arguing do not read their Bibles, because it's right in front of them. It's not just the Old Testament, it's in the New Testament. Christianity is not a Platonic religion. We ain't trying to escape earth. We're trying to bring heaven. Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to bring God's kingdom down to earth by living out his value in communities. We call those communities churches. That's what we're trying to do down here. That's what God left us here to do. And the end game is not us getting out of Dodge. The end game is, I saw a new heavens and a new earth coming down. Now the dwelling place of God is with man. That's how the story started. God walking with Adam and Eve in the cool of the day. Story ends with the dwelling place of God being with man. Where we get this notion of Platonic escapism is beyond me. But Christianity is inherently a social religion. It's God establishing his way of life on earth through his people. In the Old Testament, that was Adam, that was Seth, that was Noah, that was Abraham, that was Israelites. In the New Testament, it's Jesus doing it the right way in its fullest, most clearest sense, setting the captives free. And then it's the Christians until he returns, continuing that work here on earth. That's Christianity.
Right. Yeah, I think on that point, I've said before, the one of the symptoms and one of the reasons for this hyper individualism is what it does is it allows for the individual to be exempt from the sins of the past, but it allows for the past sin to continue to live on in these systemic ways. So they get to call exempt and to say that, that wasn't me. What do we hear all the time, right? That wasn't me. That wasn't my generation. That wasn't us, right? But yet there's still this beneficial attribute that comes with that, and it still allows for the sin of the society, right? Because God does deal with nations, right, as a whole. And that's another part that's missed in this whole narrative, this whole thing, is that there is a communal aspect to these things, and to solely look at them as just simply an individual type of situation that's a misnomer, and that's a complete misrepresentation, first of all, of the way God interacts with nations, and the way that God deals with us individually as well. So,
can I say one thing before we close? I want to give some kudos where we can. So in the videos, I don't know if it's episode 4 or 5, but I did like some of the ways that they were talking about like age appropriate lessons. That's one thing that I do struggle with my own kids right now in school. I'm like, why are y'all pushing this now? Why are you teaching this now? No. I'm having sex ed conversations way earlier than I wanted to. And, it is what it is. I'm a father. I'm going to do what I got to do. But so I did want to give Focus on the Family credit for that we do need age appropriate material, that you don't need to learn about breaking the buck in first grade. Right.
Right.
But you need to teach more than MLK when you do teach, right, not just Black history, because you can't teach American history without Black people in it. So it's just called history.
Yeah.
All right. We look like we got a question, and I put it up, but it's about our good friend Nate. And he asked, why is it important to spend time correcting misrepresentations of CRT if you don't hold to it? Love y'all. Love you too, Nate.
Love you too, Nate.
Love you too, bro.
Yeah,
Appreciate
for
your
real.
help and
Yeah,
everything.
everything, bro.
I'll say
Yeah.
real quick that, I mean, the easy reason for me is, like we said at the beginning, I think that, you know, we're very systematic in the West, and when we talk about misreading scripture and westernized and all that, we can talk about that all day. But it's like, who are the three giants? And they'll tell you it's like CRT and abortion. So it's like, these are the things, we knock one down, we tackle this, we move to the next, and it's very formulaic. But I feel like in trying to debunk CRT, if and when that were to happen, I think Mr. Phil said it earlier, is like, okay, let's say CRT is gone tomorrow. What would you do the day after that to address racism? And my guess is nothing, just like you did before CRT came on the scene. So
Yeah.
that's the reason I say it, because it's not about CRT for me or for any of us. I don't want the baby to get thrown out with the bathwater. That if you kill CRT, then all of a sudden you don't talk about racism ever again.
Right.
And we never make real
Bingo.
continue. So anyway,
Yeah, it's I echo everything you just said, bro. You know, but it's my heart's cry is really for the Christian, and especially those who are saying that they're representing God, is to have the audacity to represent God in a God-fearing way, and to do it the right way, right? Because we've talked all through this program that, you know, those who are dealing with, just throwing out names, James White, right? He deals a lot with Muslims, right? He treats Muslims with the highest regard because he does not want to offend, but he won't keep that same energy when it comes to this issue, right? Dealing with, there's others, and there's so many examples of this that it's nauseating, that the fact that we cannot treat our brothers and sisters who are brown, who might be talking about that there might be a problem in this country with racism, and it's embedded, but yet you'll take the time to study and to handle with kid gloves a person who is degrading the gospel. But yet, when it comes to your brothers and sisters in the faith who are trying to stand up for the poor, for the marginalized, for those who are being misrepresented, we don't have that same energy. So for me, that's the primary focus of some of this.
Okay, for my
next, Matthew.
Yeah, I'll take it. I just believe that the Christian witness is on the line, right? I believe that our credibility is at stake. I have strong conversations with some of my friends who disagree with me, and they can't figure out why I waste my time talking about CRT. And the reason why I take the time to do it is, number one, Christian charity, which is not Western charity. Christian charity, I'm obligated to do, right? I have an obligation to be consistent in my approach to philosophical and theological and ethical and issues of apologetics. I just want to be consistent. It's an issue of consistency for me. And another thing that I've noticed, because I was going back and forth with a friend on this, and that, no, you don't have to be an expert to disagree with something, right? You don't have to be an expert to disagree with it. But if I am quoting Martin Luther King, if I am quoting W.E.B. Du Bois or Frederick Douglass or Alexander Crummell, guys like that, even Malcolm X, if I'm quoting Malcolm X and you call it CRT, you're not interested in working on these issues in society. You whoever you are, person, are engaging in a bad faith practice.
Yeah.
And it's not becoming of a Christian. And the jig is up. If you can call MLK a critical race theorist, then Christopher Rufo has infected many inside the church. And I ask again, there's, I'll just say this again, there should be something different about Christians from folks in the world. And if I cannot see a difference in how we approach these issues, that's pretty bad. I think the Bible says that if judgment starts anywhere, it's going to start inside the church. And so it's an issue of our Christian witness, as far as I'm concerned. That's why I choose to deal with this, not because I'm a proponent, but let me just say this. I do think that critical race theory in its orthodox form gets a few things right. Question that we got to ask ourselves is, where was the church? I mean, there wouldn't be a need for a critical race theory if the church wasn't busy building private schools when school integration was happening. Liberty University, my alma mater. Okay.
I want to say something so controversial, but for the sake of my brother's reputation, I'm not gonna say it. I'm gonna tell you why. This is why, Nate. It's because as soon as I start talking about rich people, like James did, as soon as I start talking about poor people, like Jesus did, as soon as I start talking about oppressed people, like Yahweh did, as soon as I start saying any of these stuff, they say CRT. Like, I'm like, dude, I don't know. I have never read a book on CRT. Chris, me, I never read it. And I have no intention of reading any book on CRT because I don't need a book on CRT to talk about these things. If I'm quoting James, Jesus, and Yahweh, you can't quote nobody better. If I'm quoting Paul, if I'm quoting Peter, you literally, like, I'm not quoting Delgado. I'm not quoting any of these people. I'm quoting them. And so for me, it's real simple. We're critiquing it I'm critiquing it for this. It's because these guys are lying. They're lying, probably not intentionally. They're probably just misinformed. But in being misinformed, they're spreading false information. And if I can be frank, they getting bags full of cash for doing it. Bags. They writing books.
Yep.
Booty got paid for that. They writing books. They're my friend. This. I love this dude, Virgil Walker.
I'm coming for you, Virgil. I'm coming for you.
Love that dude. Pray for that dude. That dude loved me. That dude autographed this book and sent it to me because he loved me. I love
you too, Virgil, but I'm coming for you.
and he getting a bag of money. They giving scholarships out to the Masters University. Like he getting paid. I'm a missionary. I want some support. Stop. But seriously though, when I started talking about the Bible, people like them, God bless them, start calling me a CRTist. So I think it's helpful just to define what CRT actually is. So you can know I'm not a CRTist. I'm trying to be a biblicist. I'm trying to be somebody that's about the Bible and actually preaching the message of the word, right? And then, at the end of the day, I want to be blessed. I want that bag too. And I don't have no shame about that. I'm like, do not muzzle the oxen that treadeth. And that's the analogy that Paul uses when he references ministers of the gospel being compensated for the labor that they are performing. So for me, it's like, hey, listen, if those guys can get paid for lies, if I help people, Paul says, if you help people, shouldn't you be blessed financially? Hey, so I'm not going to even hide it. I'm like, I'm a missionary. I'm poor. I don't make a lot of money anymore. I worked hard in my career, and God blessed me with his decent quality of life. And now that I'm poor and not making very much money and probably pissing off a lot of people that would want to. I literally had a friend of mine said, you should just stop talking about this stuff. You'll probably do a better job of raising money if you stop talking about it. But I'm like, why should I, who is actually preaching the Bible, why should I shut up and let them people tell lies and get paid for it? So anyway, that's why I do it. I do it because they're going to call me a CRT is just for preaching the Bible. And that's a shame. And more shamefully is the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people that listen to them and assume that what they're saying about me is true when I'm just quoting scripture.
Right.
I'm sorry. Another one of my rants.
Yeah. So the purpose for me is to put up these two books. These are just two collected works on critical race theory. Notice how thick they are. All right. Notice how long these videos were. These videos are 5 to 7 minutes, 5 of them, explaining what critical race theory is. I have back here in my little library here is, you can see it back here. There's more books on critical race theory, different types of critical race theory. And this has been written over for 20, 30 years now. So the oversimplification, just be aware of the oversimplification. There is no easy thing when it comes to, critical race theory. So
sorry, everybody watching doesn't know behind the scenes was all right, I'm done.
All right. Let's what does everybody have coming up in 1 minute? Okay, let's close the show. Everybody get 1 minute, close the show out. What you got coming up in the near future, and how people can reach you and how people can support the ministry that you're doing, because we should get a bag for telling the truth, just like the people get a bag for being misinformed. Go ahead, Alex.
Okay. Well, you can go to proofforthetruth.org. And there's a tab where you can become a donor and give there. You can also go to my YouTube channel, Relentless Pursuit of Purpose. You can join. I'm eligible for channel memberships now, so y'all can join, pay my monthly membership, support in those ways. I am also director for a nonprofit here in the city. So you can just message me directly, and I can give you information on how to support that. Actually, next week, I got special guest MJ Jackson, along with a couple others, coming on to discuss prison ministry and related topics. And yeah, that's it for right now.
My homie Rochelle gonna be on there.
She is.
All right. I'm gonna see her next month. Matter of fact, I'm gonna see her probably next week, Lord willing. Okay. I'm doing some traveling. And I think we're going to cross paths while we travel.
Okay.
That's the homie.
I am on a quest to popularize a position known as Christian radicalism. That is my goal in life. That is the goal of my scholarship. Okay. That Christians would rightfully claim and own their radicalism. It's not going to sound, you're not going to fit in with the left or the right. And neither should we try. I mean, it's right. We're countercultural, right? That's what we do. And so, yes, I'm gonna be on my brother Alex's channel. I will be behaving myself. Whenever you get an invite to come to his channel, it's like you get invited to a formal gathering.
Black tie.
It's like a black
Not
tie.
Even close,
So
that's small time out here.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about some real stuff, man. We're gonna talk about private prisons and things like that. I repeat, the civil rights movement did not touch the criminal justice system. And if you take a look, right, they have these prisons out of sight, out of mind for a reason. If you take a look, you can pull the sheets back and you'll see that the emperor has no clothes. So I look forward to doing that with him. We're going to be coming back on this channel sometime soon. We'll work out the logistics because I think this was helpful. He even had Damon Richardson over here. because he wanted to catch in some of this stuff. So yeah,
we're gonna have Samuel Say on.
I was just getting ready to talk about that.
Okay, because I'm like, you keep letting that. I'm like Matthew. Do you even care? Do you even care?
I almost said something crazy. I'm gonna behave, but yeah, we're gonna try to lock in Samuel Say, have a conversation with Mr. Say, right, and try to try to catch him. So all of that, of course, in September. Go ahead, my brother.
Oh, it's my turn. Okay, yeah. So been doing a series on what I've called the roots of racism. And it just pray for my family as well. The we've had some health troubles and stuff in the house, so just keep us in prayer while you're lifting some folks up, please and thank you. But yeah, so I will be doing Lord willing on Sunday the second installment of the Roots of Racism series, looking at the doctrine of discovery and how that has affected all of American history, but not just American history, the colonial history of the world. So so we'll be looking at that and how that affects the life, and then we'll also be looking at some of the today effects of the doctrine of discovery and some of these things like Christian nationalism, and we've already went through manifest destiny. So those are some of the things we have coming up, and then also we'll be taking a break with some of the getting into more theological stuff. We won't be dealing with a lot of the social. We'll be getting into some of the theological things. So be looking forward to that. Got some stuff in the works with Elder Mike Holloway and some other folks. So yeah.
Quick thing, and shame on me for not saying this. Shame if you're listening. I'm sorry, my brother. On September 12th, Pastor Brandon Washington will be coming on the channel, and we're going to be talking about public theology and some of these pressing issues that we've been talking about. And I've been looking forward to really just sitting down, and I'm gonna try to be a good host, but I might be captive like y'all trying to learn something from that brother, fellow Texan. But he's going to be coming on the channel September 12th, my birthday, so I thought I would treat myself to a good live event. So be looking out for that.
Yeah, I just have to say publicly
himself.
Yeah, I just have to say publicly, this is my first time ministering alongside on the screen with Brother Alex, and it was an absolute pleasure to minister
Is this
alongside
our first
you.
time?
Yeah, it's our first time, I think, together. Yeah.
Well, it's been a pleasure, bro. I mean, I feel like I've known you for so long now, but yeah.
All right,
Anytime,
so
man.
this Sunday, me, Holloway, Dez, and Trey are the four amigos are going to be on Vocab Malone's channel talking about the blitz that we did on IUIC here in Detroit. That's the next video I have coming up. That's Sunday night. I got to talk to Phil after we get off here because that's late Sunday night. And we also have it's not that long. Was it less than a week? We're gonna be doing a review of Let There Be Gaslighting. Me and BK Apologists are doing I'm sorry. I didn't know that was a secret. I thought that was out. The word was out. We'd be talking about that in public.
Yeah.
So anyway, we got some stuff coming for that, in the near future. Also, some very fun stuff. Goodness gracious. And Mike Holloway's preaching at my church tomorrow. He's the preacher tomorrow morning. So yeah, that's cool. And typical stuff that I have. I'm always in the streets doing evangelism. I said at the top of the show, prayed for a guy named Thomas who accepted the Lord as his savior, pledged allegiance to King Jesus, and I want you all to pray for Thomas that he he remains faithful, so has fidelity to the pledge that he made to serve and live by the decrees of Jesus as his Lord and Savior. So yeah, keep Thomas in prayer. I'll try to keep y'all updated on him as long as I'm keeping in contact with him. I'm going to try to meet up with him for lunch or something, take him out for breakfast, lunch, or dinner, whatever he's available for this upcoming week, just so I can kind of keep some relationship with him, because he lives closer to this other church, so he's going to be going to this other church. But yeah, keep Thomas in prayer. That's it. Thanks everybody for coming out tonight. I pray that you all were edified by this. Those of you who come by later, watch this video, put questions in the comments. We always check the comments and we'll follow up and interact. As long as you're not acting like a troll, we'll engage you and be gracious with you. But and then second, we may be doing a follow-up video to this. We'll keep you posted on that. Thanks everybody for coming in tonight, and God bless.